Okay, so I'm going to give you a demonstration of the CPDME app. So tonight, once you've attended this webinar, you will get your certificate that will automatically come and land in the mobile app. Then all you need to do is just go in and reflect, or you can create an entry from something completely new. So if I go into my entries, you can see at the very top there, I've got tonight's webinar, breathing problems in children under 5. If I click onto there and I click edit, it's already put the title in there for me. I'm going to put in that it's 1 hour of CPD. I'm going to put in my governing body, which is HCPC, and there's lots of different governing bodies on there you can choose from. I'm going to save and continue, and this is where the magic happens. When people tell me it takes a long time to record CPD, watch this. Click onto that box and then click the little microphone at the bottom and then tell it what you want to write. So, took part in a CPD webinar this evening in relation to spotting the sick child and identifying breathing problems in children under the age of 5, full stop. Taking part in this webinar has supported me to identify some of the pathologies that will spot the sick child and allow me to manage that child either pre-hospitally, in hospital, or in the primary care setting, full stop. Having access to this useful information will support my clinical decision making and allow me to better care for children whilst in my care in the ambulance setting, full stop. Now, it might well need a bit of an amendment. I'm going to give you Andrew's top tip. If you need to go up and change a word, press the space bar and keep your finger on it, and it now turns into a mouse. It's like magic. You can go to any word and you can amend or change it. So I'm going to change a particular word, keep my finger on the space bar, and I'm going to go down to manage, and I'm going to go delete, 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 or let me click on that again and change that to support. And then I'm going to click onto save and continue. I'm going to select my HCPC standards, click onto save and continue again. My evidence is already there. You can see down in the middle, my CPD evidence is there. If I click on it, the certificate is there. It's a bit weird, it's got my name on it and I wrote the certificate at the bottom, but hey-oh. And then I'm going to click save and submit. Once I've done save and submit, actually you can see at the very top of there, I've got my entry. It's 88% complete, 1 hour of CPD. If I click on it and click preview, you can see a print ready copy of my diary entry. What have I done? Why have I taken part? How is it going to change my practice? And if I scroll up, you can see my certificate. And when it comes to wanting to print all of this off in a perfectly formatted PDF or digital copy, I simply just go to cpdme.com, probably the same place as you went to register for this webinar. So download the app and make your CPD simple.
Your CPD simple indeed. It really is as simple as you have just seen on screen. So good evening, ladies and gents. If you haven't downloaded the app, I'm going to show you how to do that in a second, or if you're fast on the finger, you can quickly search or scan that QR code. But welcome on this evening to tonight's webinar. My name is Andrew Ormerod. I'm delivering this from home tonight, fortunately, and so I'm not normally sat in my warm office because I've had to come home to look after my dogs. So welcome on board. Tonight we're going to be introducing Dr. Mike Davis, avoiding groupthink, managing productive norms through effective leadership in teams. So if you are completely new to webinars, welcome on board. Always good to have you. We can't see or hear you, and we can't see you on the camera. So if you're sat there in your gym jams or whatever you're wearing, we can't see you, so please don't worry. But what we can do is get you to interact on the chat. So please do pop into the chat where you are dialing in from tonight, and also maybe what you do for a living and what's interested you in tonight's webinar. And if you have got any questions for Dr. Mike Davis, then please do pop them into the questions and answer box, and I'll pose them to Mike at the end of tonight's presentation. If you are a member of CPDME, then you will get a certificate for attending tonight, and so we'll sift through the list, and that will be automated. And as I showed you at the beginning, if you do have the mobile app, the certificate and the title and the date will automatically go into the app, and all you need to do then is simply reflect on what you've learned tonight. So it really does make your CPD simple, I guarantee you. You will also all get a copy of the recording sent to you. So if you missed some of tonight's broadcast or you're catching up on YouTube, you will get a copy of the recording that's emailed out tomorrow automatically. And again, you'll get your CPD certificates by email. So as well as going into the app, they'll also arrive into your email address. There will be some opportunity to scan QR codes tonight. So if you've got a QR code scanner on your mobile, then please do have your mobile ready and you can point it at the screen and take some part in our interactivity. If not, I'll try and point you towards the website as well. So you can always do that. If you are on social media, then please do join us on Twitter at CPDMe. Always good to see what you're up to tonight, whether you're taking part in some relaxed learning, whether you're sat in a rapid response vehicle, whether you're spinning around in a helicopter, or indeed you're in an emergency department or a learning zone. But please do share us at CPDMe and use hashtag CPDMadeSimple. What's even more important is if you capture something from tonight's amazing webinar that actually you can translate directly into practice, then please do share that with us in the coming few days on Twitter also, and I'll make sure that you copy Dr. Mike Davis into that too. If you're not a member of CPDMe, we have an amazing lineup of tangible benefits, including up to 80 live webinars per year with automated CPD certificates, plus the most amazing and easiest way possible that you can record your CPD. I guarantee, or I will simply give you your money back. So please, if you're not a member, scan that QR code and you can have a 30-day trial for £1.99. If you're not happy after that 30 days, I'll give you your £1.99 back. I'm pretty confident that you'll enjoy what we have to offer. And it produces the most easiest and simplest print-ready CPD portfolio you would ever need, or whether you're HCPC, GMC, NMC, or whether you just need to keep an accurate record of your CPD, the team will be there to support you. So please do consider joining us tonight. I'm sure we've got lots of members on tonight. Maybe pop in the chat whether you are a member and whether you use CPDMe, but it's always good to share your success stories and how you use it to record your own learning and development. And of course, we have just recently gone live with our new GMC system. So if there's any doctors out there who are struggling to record their CPD, then jump on board and we will make it easy for you. If you are not following us on YouTube, all of our broadcasts are live on YouTube. So if you're ever really struggling and you want to put it on the car on the drive home as a podcast, then you can jump onto our YouTube channel or you subscribe to us at youtube.com/CPDMe. Tonight, you will probably see that I have got a massive pile of books behind me here. I don't know if you can see my camera, but I've got some super books for this week's giveaway. What have we got for giveaway? Primary care and community nursing. We have got advanced health assessment in clinical diagnosis in primary care, the 6th edition. I've got the textbook of non-medical prescribing. I've got our regular clinical skills Eureka. I've got an amazing book that I've just read actually, so it's technically second-hand. Clinical skills for OSCEs. We've got independent prescribing for paramedics. So that's useful for anybody who's going into advanced practice. And we've got an amazing book for those practitioners out there, Roger Neighbour, The Inner Consultation. So I've got a pile of books to give away tonight for people who leave us genuine, and I sincerely mean genuine reviews. So those people who do use CPDMe or enjoy our webinars, if you leave us a review on Trustpilot, on the App Store, if you use the app, or indeed on Google, I will literally, at the end of this presentation, pluck off a couple of winners, and then tomorrow I'll equally give away 3 more books. So please do scan them QR codes or jump onto Trustpilot, Google, or the App Store. If you haven't already downloaded the app, please do so. You can download the app by searching CPDMe, and that will allow you to literally download the app and then capture all your CPD and make your CPD life so much easier. All that leaves me to do now is I need to probably have a drink because I've done enough talking, is to hand you over to Dr. Mike Davis. So are you there, Dr. Mike?
Hi, Andrew. Yes, I'm here, ready to go.
I'm going to hand all over to you now. I'm going to stop my camera, turn my mic off, and the screen is all yours.
Okay, and I will screen. I need you to allow me to share my screen, Andrew.
Oh, that sounds technical. Let's have a look at that. Sure, I can do that for you. There we go, Mike. It's all yours.
Great stuff. And that should be something that you can all see. Yeah, good. Excellent. So welcome to this evening's talk about a little bit of a further exploration of some of the challenges associated with our management of situations by virtue of our participation in teams. Those of you who've listened in on some of my previous webinars will know that this is an area of particular interest for me, given that I'm a non-clinical medical educator. I tended to focus on both the educational processes, but also issues arising from human factors training and that type of engagement. I revisited the whole idea of groupthink a number of months ago when I was teaching on a European trauma course in North Yorkshire, and I was reminded of this being one of the challenges of, to some extent, groups that were seen of as being effective performers of shared tasks. And I just want to give you a brief history of the origin of groupthink as a theory. It arose from studies conducted in the latter part of the 20th century, when people got together and started to explore the implications of decision-making processes that led to really poor outcomes. And the issues that were particularly notable at the time were things like the attempted invasion of Cuba in 1962, 1963, something called the Bay of Pigs, and subsequently another series of similar status type events that were arising from American political life particularly. So groupthink emerged as a way of accounting for a phenomenon that created a situation where poor decision making arose out of essentially groups of able, capable people contributing to very poor decision making. Just to remind those of you who are interested in possibly pursuing this subject matter a little bit further, this is my email address and my Twitter handle. Please don't hesitate to make use of those if you're interested in pursuing things. And just to remind you, this is where I'm currently from, in Blackpool, and yeah, however, has been a nice sunny but cool day here today. Okay, so our focus is on groupthink. We're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about how it manifests itself, and then spending a little bit of time thinking about how we might avoid it and what sort of behaviors are necessary in effective teams if decision-making processes are not going to be impacted on negatively by groupthink. There's a very useful definition here that I'd like you to have a quick look at, and I'll give you a few seconds or so to read that. And this is taken from the work of a chap called McChrystal, who's a general in the British Army, and quoted by this chap called Sharp, Lindsay Sharp, who's a lieutenant colonel in the British Army, responsible for thinking about the way in which teams effectively function in military settings. Obviously, the observations that have been made by Sharp and his colleagues apply slightly differently to civilian life, but nevertheless do have very close similarities. And it is certainly true, and if you think about it from your own practice, that there are all sorts of connections that you have during the course of your professional life. You engage directly with your immediate colleagues. You find yourself thrown into situations where you're expected to function as a member of a team. And those can be multidisciplinary, they can be multi-hierarchical, they can arrive from a whole variety of different perspectives. But effectively, a team has got to come together to be able to function for itself in possibly a limited space of time, and hopefully have positive outcomes as a consequence of that. And inevitably, one of the inevitable consequences of team existence is the fact that there are members of the team and who have to exercise a sort of followership function. And there are people who take on leadership responsibilities, possibly different people at different times, but nevertheless, there's always somebody who's got responsibility for overseeing direction. And if that doesn't actually arise quite naturally, there tends to be chaos until it does arise. Okay, so quick poll for the first time. So Andrew, if you could set up poll 1, I'd be very grateful. And this is inviting you to think about your own experience of being a member of a team and possibly finding it, some of the decision-making processes not entirely to your satisfaction. So I'll give you a few seconds or so to do that.
.44% registered up to now.
Okay.
So you should be able to just click the option on screen, ladies and gents. 56%. I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, we'll close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there's your results, Mike.
Okay, right. Well, I've got to say that's fairly fairly expected outcome from that people have gone along with either the suggestion or the instruction to follow a particular course of action, even though you've had reservations about it. And it's precisely that phenomenon that underlies the capacity for teams to reach that status of groupthink. It's the situation where people have reservations, and for whatever reason, and we'll come back to the reasons in a little while, for whatever reason, they don't express their reservations or express them sufficiently forcibly to change the decision-making process. So, this is a definition of some of the issues that can arise from this. So have a quick look at this quotation. And it was quotations like this that led me to think that this is something that's possibly well worth revisiting, groupthink. As a psychological theory, it's got people who've argued quite strongly that, in fact, there's absolutely no validity in thinking about this. It's very difficult to actually pinpoint a body of empirical evidence that provides support for this. And all of the analyses of situations where groupthink has been ascribed as a characteristic behavior have all been somewhat retrospective as a consequence. So it doesn't have the same sort of enthusiasm from some sections of the community of social psychology or psychology, for example, that other theories of group performance have. But fascinatingly, it has rearisen in a number of contemporary contexts in recent weeks, recent months, sorry. And this particular quotation relates to the situation where people are responding negatively to the idea of being vaccinated, particularly in the United States, where this particular study took place. And they're recognizing the fact that some of the characteristics of the community that is rejecting vaccination in the presence of COVID, the potential of COVID infection, are in fact victims, and I would emphasize the word victims of groupthink. They're recognizing this as a particular sort of challenge to their perception and their system of organizing their thought process about the virus and the world, and the political system that is attempting to impose certain obligations on people. I think it's brilliantly summed up by this cartoon here as a representation of what actually is going on in groupthink. So have a quick look at this and consider what you've got here in this sort of crude representation, perhaps, of what goes on in decision-making processes. probably in some sort of organization where lots of males are in charge of making decisions about things. But here you have somebody who is quite self-evidently a leader. The man on the left, he's the one standing, everybody else is looking, gazing up at him, and he's inviting them to agree with the proposal that he's making, and he gets that agreement verbally expressed by them all voting in favor. But everybody else is thinking something quite different about the potential outcome. And this is, of course, the situation that you've identified, so many of you identified as you being in the situation where that type of process was actually taking place. You were the one contributing, if you like, to an apparent agreement about a decision that you got strong or, you know, possibly less strong, but nevertheless reservations about the appropriateness of it. And part of the consequence of that for people leading in those sorts of situations is because of that unanimity, there is this notion of the illusion of invulnerability, that as a consequence of your superior thought processes and decision-making capacity and persuasive ability and general team leadership, things cannot go wrong in your decision-making process. And I think that this is one of the key characteristic features of groups who function with that sort of notion of this illusion of invulnerability. They don't think that things are going to go wrong. And among the things that happen for a variety of reasons is things don't go wrong until they do go wrong. And that's the point at which groupthink sort of generates, if you like, data that supports its basic assumptions. So if you think about the clinical situations that you might find yourself in from time to time, the question that I'd ask of you is, who is it that is, excuse me, who is it that's invulnerable? Is it the team leader, the person making the recommendation? Is it the team members who are going along with that recommendation? Is it nobody at all? Or is it everybody in that situation? So Andrew, if you could throw up this, this second poll, please, and invite you to consider who is invulnerable. And if you've got comments about this particular question, or in fact anything else, don't hesitate to use the chat line. So I'll give you a few seconds to have a think about that.
Okay, so the poll's live now, Dr. Mike, and people are going faster finger this time. So we've got over 50% who's already voted.
Excellent.
Okay, just 65% now, so we'll close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. There's your results.
Realistically, that is exactly the situation, that nobody in that particular setting is invulnerable. And I think that among the observations that I would make about this is that the question quite deliberately doesn't invite a consideration of the vulnerability of people who the decision is being made about. In other words, in a clinical setting, that might be a patient. In the case of Apollo 13, it was the astronauts sitting in the capsule waiting for liftoff. In the case of the Bay of Pigs, it was the people who were victims, if you like, as a consequence, the unintended victims of the attempted invasion of Cuba. So we've got a situation where, in fact, invulnerability is somewhat of a myth, and hence the expression in the title. It is definitely an illusion. So this is where the questioning gets difficult, and this poll probably demands a little bit more of a thinking time for you to come with a response to this. So we'll give you a little bit longer for poll 3. But what I'm inviting you to do in this poll is to think about what you might consider to be the dominant ingredients likely to engender groupthink. And I want you just to choose one of these characteristics to determine what you think might be the thing that is most likely. And we'll see whether there's any agreement about this at all. So back to you, Andrew.
Okay, so that poll's going to like, it does say poll 2 at the top, but I think that was me misspelling it earlier. So this is poll 3. We've got about 25% up to now voted. So we've still got a few more people yet to vote. Let's see if we can get up to 65%.
It's more of a difficult question than the others that we've had so far.
Okay, so just a few more seconds.
Okay.
We've just got just above 55% now.
Okay, that's
I think people are still pondering. So we'll go for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll end the poll there. And there's your results, Mike.
Right, that's quite interesting. So I don't know whether we can capture that and possibly return to it later, Andrew, if that's at all possible. But if you can sort of just have a note of it, at least that we've got a reasonable indication. Okay, so the favorite that you've got here is the defective decision-making process. And I think that that possibly does qualify as being one of the more appropriate things that accounts for the challenge. But surprisingly, the first thing that invariably is talked about as being representative of creating a situation that potentially could engender groupthink is something somewhat unexpected, I think. And that is that the decision makers, i.e. members of the group, constitute a coherent group. Now then, this represents a little bit of a challenge to us, doesn't it? Because all of the work that we do and all of the thinking that we engage in respect of the way in which teams can come together to effectively manage situations, among the things that we argue for is the importance of actually developing a team spirit and that sense of coherence that is potentially the basis of good practice. But it is also the thing that can actually create the most common feature that can create a situation where poor decision-making processes emerge. And there's this long quote here that you can possibly have a look at by visiting the website at a later point. But I've identified a number of things that are key ingredients from this quote. That teams that are vulnerable remain intact for longer. They have pressures to comply. They have situations where members who dissent potentially suffer poor consequences, and that there is limited connection with, if you like, the outside world. So they're all of the ones that I particularly focus on, but the one that I think is the most key ingredient I want you to pay attention to is this one here. So I'll give you a few seconds, just have another quick read of it. So what we have here, if Cartwright in 1968 was correct in identifying this issue, that this notion of cohesion, a coherent group who've got shared goals, shared aspirations, etc., are the ones that are most vulnerable to the idea of responding inappropriately and going along with decisions that are potentially wrong for, to a greater or lesser degree. So essentially what I'm arguing here is that there is a double-edged sword in the challenge that we face in bringing together people in effective groups. The first being that is something that we aspire towards, and that we look for different ways in which they can be encouraged to behave appropriately in support of a shared set of goals. With a big but, we then have to be very careful to ensure that they don't actually sort of cohere in such a way that they are incapable of challenging the decision-making processes. The other characteristics of groupthink are a little bit more complex in many respects, but they're summed up in the headings in each of these categories here. The notion that the organization within which the team or group is functioning have got some structural faults. And these can be in the way in which systems and responses are organized, or the sort of protocols that people are forced into situations, etc., etc. But there are provocative situational contexts, and these are the sort of things that you can sort of identify by virtue of the nature of their external threat. So, for example, COVID-19 was a particular threat to the ability of groups to, in the early days anyway, to fully function effectively. And there are a number of studies that have emerged that have been highly critical about the way in which people responded to things as mundane, but nevertheless vitally important, as donning and doffing during the management of COVID cases. So those sorts of high stress situations that emerge from external threats to the functioning of a group also have the capacity to encourage people to think of quick, easy to agree with solutions. In terms of symptoms of the groupthink as a generality, you've got these three notions of overestimation of the group. In other words, a sort of feeling, this sort of extending this feeling of invulnerability. You've got the notion of, I'm sorry, can you move that a sec? Oh, it's okay, I've got it. This notion of closed-mindedness, that you're resistant to the idea of thinking about alternatives, and the whole social pressure that encourages people to share a worldview, perhaps, you know, this notion of uniformity. As a such and such a person, this is what we think. And it reminds me of some of the challenges that I think communities of practice face, because they do have that potential to encourage people to think in the same way as everybody else, that this is how we do things in this situation, this is how we consider an appropriate response. The potential for defective decision-making has got these particular features here. So incomplete survey of alternatives, in other words, you look for the notion of an early first move, first suggestion. And there was a little bit of research that went on in the 1960s about something called the first move rule, which suggested that anybody who makes a reasonable suggestion about something early on in a decision-making process is likely to be viewed more favorably than others. That you have an incomplete survey of the objectives of a particular exercise. There's a failure to examine risks, a failure to reappraise alternatives, related to possibly the notion of not sufficiently exploring what the issues are. So poor information searching, selective bias, cognitive bias, etc., and failure to work out contingencies if and when things do go wrong. And finally, we've got this notion of a low probability of successful outcomes if those sorts of things combine in particular ways to encourage people to respond inappropriately when given the opportunity to impact on a decision. So all of these things together, these headings that we've got here, are potential features of groupthink, and come together to create a situation where it's possible for well-meaning, thoughtful people, but nevertheless having a capacity to suppress their reservations, their uncertainties, and so on, for whatever reason exists, and arrive at a poor decision-making process. Okay, so back to this. particular representation. And I think the question that I'd ask you generally to have a little bit of a ponder on is what creates an environment when you have this type of situation arising? What are the characteristic features of team performance that allows one person to occupy that dominant position at the head of the table, making the suggestion and inviting people to respond by agreeing with it rather than by challenging it. So if you think about ways in which our chap on the left-hand side could say, I'm proposing that this particular course of action, does anybody have any reservations about this particular course of action? Rather than him saying, as he actually does here in this cartoon, all those in favour say aye. And the former suggestion of inviting reservations is actually quite different to the way in which you would receive the invitation to agree. And obviously that is a characteristic of leadership. And that's one of the issues that perhaps is implied by the higher level of response to defective decision-making processes, where leadership is very much, decision-making processes are very much in the hands of the leader. So I suppose what we've got to think about is what can we do to intervene, knowing when to intervene. And I don't know what your thoughts are about when to intervene, but when you are conscious of a point in a team process when a major decision is being made, what processes go through the team's heads collectively, and how can they influence the potential outcome? So when you're in a situation when you could see the possibility of a poor decision being made, you've got to decide when it is that you're going to intervene. Is it early? Is it late? Is it at the point at which people are going to act on that? Or is it at the point at which they are beginning to move towards a consensus, if that's the case, of a particular decision-making process? And possibly more importantly than the when, or certainly as importantly, is the how. How do we intervene? What is it that we do? And for some reason, my screen has just popped something else up. I think I can move it out of the way. So how is it that we intervene? And the model that has had some mileage in some communities is, excuse me, I've had a cold and it's making my throat a little bit dry. The model that I'm very aware of from the community that I belong to, particularly in relation to team activity, is PACE, which stands for Probe, Alert, Challenge and Escalate. And what I've got here is just a representation of that using this particular cartoon. So here is our first potential invitation to intervene when the prompt is, are you sure about such a particular course of action? We then have, don't you think that this will cause such a potential outcome? And we're going up the hierarchy to, I'm afraid that this will, which is an exploration of potential consequences. And then finally, where stop what you're doing, I am going to call for additional help or gain or take on responsibility or whatever. And that is the recommendation within the European Trauma Course community for the way in which you can intervene at the point at which it looks as if inappropriate decision-making processes are going to emerge from whatever practice are engaging. And my understanding is that this is adapted from the procedures in the aircraft cockpit, if the co-pilot is conscious of the fact that the pilot is making inappropriate decision makings. So this sort of escalation of response is an appropriate way of preventing a situation where a poor decision is being made. But there are challenges inevitably to this type of intervention, and I just want to spend a brief moment thinking about what these might be. The main one arises from the long quotation back a few slides ago, and this is this notion of dissent creating a situation where the person who does dissent suffers negative interpersonal consequences as a direct consequence of their reluctance and resistance to the idea of the particular decision-making process itself. So anybody who stands out and says, I don't think that's a good idea, is at risk of being insulted, attacked verbally, certainly will suffer potential consequences beyond the immediate in terms of their ability to influence decision-making processes in the group, despite the fact that there may well be other people in the group who continue to support that decision-making process, who have very, very strong reservations about the decision-making itself. And I think it's probably fair to say that this is a fairly accurate representation of what was going on in the Trump White House in the latter days of President Trump's occupancy there, that senior members of that particular community were sharing amongst themselves very, very strong reservations about the line that was being adopted by the president and his most senior advisors at the time. And that was a good example of people who were refusing to dissent publicly to him at that time, but nevertheless sharing their reservations in other places. So the consequences of that are fairly significant in terms of the situation that arises. It means that bad decisions can continue to be made unless good decisions make themselves, if you like, visible. So how do we create the ideal situation? How do we create effective teams that are capable of being coherent, sharing common objectives, etc., but at the same time avoid the challenge of making bad decisions on the basis of groupthink? And I just want to revisit a slide that I introduced a few webinars ago about the nature of norm formation in effective groups and teams. And effectively what we were describing on those occasions is that you've got three levels of normative behavior: the individual, the group, and the cross-boundary. You've got then these 6 dimensions, and arising from those are the 9 dominant norms that we focus on to create an effective environment within a team. And I think the 3 that are key ingredients in avoiding groupthink are these 3 that you have here on the screen: that of interpersonal understanding, team self-evaluation, where there is a constant self-critique of the decision-making processes as they emerge, followed by an exploration of the implications of the decisions that have been made, and then an understanding of the complexity of the organization and how it relates to the, if you like, the outside world, the immediate environment of the team actually functioning at that time. And that brings me to an end of my exploration of groupthink. For the time being, I think it's something that we're going to be revisiting, possibly as a consequence of some of the decision-making processes that we've seen emerging around COVID and our response to it. And at that point, I'll hand back to Andrew. Thanks very much indeed.
Mike, thanks very much indeed. Again, for an engaging presentation. There is a couple of questions. I'm going to give people a few minutes just to pop up some more Q&As in there, and I will just tell you what is going down in the world of CPD in the up and coming few weeks. So just let me share my screen, and I'll see where we're up to. Let me have a look at that. Done. Fabulous. So while you're thinking about popping some Q&As in there, I'll just tell you about what's coming in the next couple of weeks. So on the 9th of November, we have got Dr. Akash, our very own endocrinologist, talking about arterial blood gas interpretation and locations. So that's a free webinar. Please do scan that QR code or jump over to the website at cpdme.com/webinar and you can book on for that. I think we've already got about 1,200 people registered for that event, so it will be a busy one for anybody interested in arterial blood gases. So your COPD patients, respiratory failures and such. We have got our clinical symposium on the 11th of December at 9 o'clock till 1 o'clock. And for members of CPDME, it is £4.99, cheap as chips. And for non-members, it's £9.99, so basically a half price for members. And we already have about, I think, 650 people registered for that event. You'll also get all the pre-course learning material and handouts, and that's talking clinical history taking. So everything from working in primary care, emergency care, ambulance service and such, right through to the emergency department. So lots of different elements of geriatric history taking, pediatric history taking, and emergency history taking. So something for everybody there, and even for the experienced practitioner. You'll pick up some great tips from our very own Dr. Chris and Dr. Akash. To capture all of our CPD webinars, all you simply need to do is just jump onto the website and you can scan that QR code, or you can download all our posters and you can share our free CPD with your colleagues at work. Okay, so we'll go to Q&A now and let's have a look. It looks like we've got a couple of questions and answers lined up for you, Mike. Let me log on to the Q&A box. So we've got from this, Dr. Davis, to what extent do you think selection process of personnel, i.e. job applications, have an impact on groupthink? For example, if it is known that in job applications that selection committee strongly favours applicants that resemble the existing group, I was just wondering if groupthink can already be tweaked at this level or not. And thank you for a great talk.
Thanks very much for that. It's an interesting question, actually, and I suspect that the situation is that groups who are unaware of the issue, the potential of counterproductive behaviour in teams, are going to be looking for appointing people who share their characteristics, in a sense, that they are self-replicating by virtue of the fact that, you know, they see themselves as making a powerful contribution. They're insightful, they're accurate in their interpretation of events and so on. So there is a strong tendency to self-replicate. And I think one of the things that effective team creators are far more likely to achieve is to do exactly the opposite of that, and to look for the people who have got alternative thought process, who will look for different decision-making processes, who actively encourage dissent, perhaps, as an appropriate strategy for the way in which groups function. And, you know, if you think about your own situation that you might have been in a variety of settings, whether they were creative or exploratory or whatever, you really do benefit from the process of listening to people who don't agree with you as much as you do from listening to the contributions of people who say, yeah, that's right, I agree everything you say. So actually accepting and welcoming the challenge of difference is probably something that a good organization will seek to do. So good question, and that is generally my perception of that particular situation.
Next question from Ian. Do you think there is a greater risk of groupthink in organisations with a rank structure? Oh,
yeah,
that's a good question.
I think it's absolutely almost inevitable, particularly if people take the hierarchy seriously. You know, if they think that it's absolutely vital that people respect and attend to the opinions of senior people simply by virtue of their seniority, is making it far more likely that people are susceptible to that. And in fact, interestingly, one of the big challenges that come from groupthink is the British Army. I've recently been reading this book on leadership in the Army, and while there's a very heavy focus, obviously, in the military of the ranks and the distinction that's been made between the non-commissioned and the commissioned officers, and a very, very rigid hierarchy in many respects. Among the things that the author of this particular book, which is Sharp, who I quoted from earlier on, what he talks about is the fact that there is enormous value placed on a sort of open culture where everybody's got, in fact, expected to have the capacity to be involved in the decision-making process at key moments. Obviously, the difference in the army is that there is then a point at which, and it possibly isn't a difference actually, there is a point at which somebody has to make a decision, but that decision is based on being willing to listen to dissenting points of view rather than just having that agreement. But clearly, from the context that we're describing here in clinical practice, there are serious risks associated with assuming that by virtue of the hierarchy, that people have got the right to claim the greater authority in the decision-making process. That is probably something that has to be challenged by effective teams.
We've got a question from Darren. Do you think personally that low self-efficacy and fear of change can positively reinforce a negative groupthink?
Yeah, fear of change is a real challenge, isn't it? You know, it's one of the potentially conservative forces that exists within communities of practice. It's an area of interest that recently emerged from another project that I was involved in relatively recently. And we are exploring the fact that those closed communities have got an amazing potential to sustain and create growth and development, but also have negatively, they've also got the capacity to create a situation where low effectiveness, low resistance to new ideas, etc., that arise from things like low self-efficacy can create a situation where poor decisions are made. So I agree.
Thanks, Dr. Mike. Just some really good comments in the chat from there. Nicholas joined us, who's a practice educating facilitator from WWL. We've got Lord Allen, who's I've gone the line. The last question up in a second for. We've got Stephen, who's a paramedic from Scotland. Andrea, who's a student para from Doncaster. Avril, who's a nurse from Bristol. We've got Christine, who's an ODP from Edinburgh. We've got Rob from Bergen, helicopter human factors facilitator. That sounds like a fab job, Rob, I have to say. We've got Andy. We've got Andy Collin, who I think I've just looked at one of our. Andy Collin, are you the author of the book that we're going to give one away tonight? I'm just very intrigued because one of these authors of the paramedic prescribing book is Andy Collin, and we've got an Andy Collin on tonight. I wonder if it's you. I'm intrigued because I'm guessing if it's Andy, who I think he's the author, he's the paramedic as well. So it could be you. Who knows? We've also got Sarah, who's a paramedic undertaking human factors modules. Ian, Sarah, lots and lots and lots of really good comments, in fact. And I think we've got an ED consultant, I think, who I've just missed out. Yep. Shamela, consultant emergency medicine from Bermuda.
Wow.
It's going to be warmer in Bermuda than it is in Blackpool, Dr. Mike.
I think absolutely true.
And the last question we've got is from Alan. From a medical legal background, I'm always putting my reservations forward, even with a fairly resolute language. I then suffer a barrage of criticism for being negative or depressive, despite putting forward recommendations to counter the negative outcome I foresee. Is this what others suffer from?
I think, yeah, I think we've probably all found ourselves in that situation where there is a lack of enthusiasm for, if you like, a critique, particularly if the actions are sort of ritualized or protocol driven or possibly mundane. You know, oh no, not you again type response to that situation. And I think that that is an unfortunate reaction, really. And one that, you know, has the potential to create really, really poor outcomes. And I think there are some sections of our community, the wider healthcare provision, that are somewhat susceptible to this as a behaviour, and as a consequence of that, have poor outcomes and potentially suffer reputationally as a consequence of that. So I think that we need as a community, if we're going to retain, excuse me, if we're going to retain team health and so on, we need to acknowledge the fact that an effective team is also a community that allows for and in fact welcomes dissent and the other issues that you described there. Yeah, so I think that there are risks with that response.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Well, we have got one review left for us tonight. So Alice, are you still here? I can't see whether you're still in the participants list because I can't, let me have a quick look, see if I can see my participants list. 1 second, because I need to know which book you're on, Alice, because you are the person I have just quickly picked from the list. So let me have a quick look down that list. And we've also got Andy's come back to say, yes, he is the co-author of that book. I suspect it was Andy, and it is a fab book. So anybody who's interested in paramedic prescribing or independent prescribing, please do go and have a look at that book because it is amazing. And Shamila has put, yes, Bermuda, it's currently 26 degrees. So I could easily fall out with you, Shamila. Never met, but I could easily fall out with you. It doesn't look like we have still got this lovely lady online, but I will follow up and I will make sure that she gets to pick a book. So please do leave us some reviews. It's really important. It's either a fair and a genuine review. So if you don't like using CPDME, or you do like using CPDME, or you like the webinars, or you don't like the webinars, you have to be open and honest. And we don't just give books and things out to 5-star reviews, but we also give them out to 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star. And then we take that to our innovation team to make sure that we improve our systems. So all that leaves me to say, Dr. Mike, is on behalf of all the team here at CPDME, thank you so much indeed for, again, another amazing one of your presentations.
Thanks very much indeed. I'm delighted to be here. Sorry for my coughing. I'm sure I'll be better by next month. I'm going to send over a bottle of Codeine Linctus just for you with a packet of lockets. So, Dr. Mike, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gents, thank you so much indeed again for you spending time with us tonight. If you are at work, please do stay safe, and thank you for being out there and supporting the communities. If you are at home, kick off your slippers, maybe pop into your dressing gown and enjoy the rest of your evening. But thank you so much on behalf of myself, all the team here at CPDME, and Dr. Mike Davis, of course. So stay safe. Thank you and have a great evening. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.